Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me again for the Dare Dallas webinar. This afternoon, I'm joined by my very lovely colleague, Annabell Parry. But first of all, just a quick apology for anyone that joined me last week with Jenny Knott. Unfortunately, after the recording of it was a lovely webinar on silver, there were some background noises that we hadn't taken into consideration because we were actually replaying a video, and it was completely my fault, and we hadn't realised there was a microphone still on and there was some building work going on and lots of other things. So please do accept my apologies if you actually managed to get some builders chatting away whilst you were trying to listen to Jenny and I discussing some silver. The actual video's on YouTube, so if you did have to switch off after hearing builders talking about nails and drills and whatnot, then please do catch it on YouTube. Now, Annabell, lovely to see you again, as always.
Hello there, afternoon.
And I trust you're enjoying the sunshine.
I think, like you, I've been working all week, so I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Well, indeed. We'll get there soon enough. So, Annabell, the discussion topic for today is pearls. Now, something we haven't really touched on before at all in the Dare Dallas webinar, which is a bit strange because we've touched on most subjects. Now, pearls are considered by some to be, one of the most beautiful items in jewellery, but they're so subject to fashion, aren't they, really? What can you tell us about the pearls, how they're formed, how they've been used, and why they've been used?
Could we start with a little bit of history?
Of course, yes, by all means.
Most people who have a passing knowledge of pearls think that they started with a chap called Mikimoto at the beginning of the 20th century. And that couldn't be further than the truth. This is, just on the screen at the moment, is the oldest pearl in the world. As you can see at the bottom, it's actually been dated to 8,000 years old. It still looks beautiful now. This is the oldest one that we know of, but they were very popular in Roman jewellery. Roman jewellery has been unearthed with pearls still in them. And also in the 13th century, the Chinese were actually putting tiny carved Buddha within mollusks, which were then coating them with nacre, and they were used as holy relics. So they have been really popular for centuries. And in fact, more than centuries, millennia, and they have always been rare. And really, probably moving into about the 1300s, that's when the Middle East really became the centre of the pearl culture. And pearl diving was actually one of the main jobs that you could do out there. It was actually passed down through families. It was quite a specialized job. It actually was done by some people who were they were probably lower down the social status, but if they could find some really beautiful pearls, it would change their entire family's future. Going there for around 500 years, the pearls really came mostly from the United Arab Emirates and the Middle East. They would go sailing on a trip for about 4 months at a time and dive for thousands and thousands of pearls, and just to actually make a decent harvest. So you've actually got another picture, a black and white one, if you wouldn't mind showing that.
Of course, no, we can get that for you now. Let me just find that one. So
this one shows a pearling boat at probably in the 1880s, and you can see obviously gentlemen on board, and these are the divers in the water, and they actually have a peg on their nose, and they have a rock tied to one of their feet, and there's also one of these ropes that they will be pulled back up to the boat with. So there's basically one man to one diver, but they literally free dive. And generally, as a general rule of thumb, about 1 every 4,000 mollusks, you'll find a pearl.
So they're having to go down, and are you basically saying that for every time they go down, they're only realistically going to find them on a few rare occasions?
Absolutely. This is why it could change a family's livelihood or the the voyage they go on. This is why they go to different pearl beds over a 4-month period to make it worthwhile. And so it's about 1 in every 4,000 you may find a pearl. It's about 1 in every 10,000 that is actually a gem quality pearl. So when you start looking at the number of mollusks that you actually have to bring up and open to actually find a gem quality pearl, you suddenly start realizing why natural pearls are so expensive. Now, the next one is there's some pearls in red cloths. And this is the way that the United Arab Emirates and the Middle East have shown pearls for years. Often their pearls have a rather lovely sort of rose sort of overtone to them. So they obviously look very, very good in red. And here you have different sizes of natural pearls that are obviously being traded. And then if you wouldn't mind going to the next one again, we've got another slightly more modern picture of divers off a ship here. The water looks beautiful, and it certainly does today. So I just wanted to show these pictures. Here we go.
So is this, you know, do people still, you know, go diving for pearls like this even now?
They do. As you can see, this is much, much later. They still do it. There are still pearling families, not very many. And also, to be really honest, by the early 20th century, a lot of the pearl beds had been fished out. Right. But they hadn't got a clear view of the continuity of what was needed at that time. So there were so many fishing boats going out pearling that the beds were becoming few and far between. And I've actually got a statistic here that until the early 20th century, pearls made up 75% of Persian Gulf exports. 75%. So this was obviously before oil was discovered.
Wow.
But it was massive. It was absolutely huge. And so we finally get ourselves to the beginning of the 20th century, and pearl fishing becomes pearl farming. And which brings us, really, it's the next 100 years, pearl farming becomes perfected. And if you have another picture, again, rather lovely sun-drenched one, that's the one. This is a typical pearl farm now.
So just to ask the question, so how are these pearls farmed, and how are they different from the natural pearls that I'm presuming during the times and during the fishing that we've seen, it's very much like, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but very much like fishing for any other type of animal in the sea. You go where they are and you take some luck. But this is obviously a far more calculated approach to farming, isn't it?
This is planned for decades in advance. So in the early 1900s, there were 3 Japanese gentlemen, and I think it was 1902, 1908 and 1910, who all put in for a patent for culturing pearls within an oyster, essentially farming them. And the most famous of those 3 is Mikimoto. He actually wasn't the first one to get the patent, but he was most certainly the most successful. And they really, it took them about 20 years to perfect it, to be able to get enough cultured pearls to be produced that they actually were able to be retailed and come to the market generally. And it is really by the 20s and 30s that cultured pearls really start coming to the market. And they absolutely decimated the Middle Eastern trade. There are obviously several elements for the Middle Eastern trade, but it absolutely shut down. But if we then concentrate onto particularly the Japanese and South Seas as well, with the Pacific, they really got their act together and could produce, they still only produce 1 or 2 pearls out of a mollusk. If you're looking at what's called the akoyas, we'll have a look at the individual types in a moment, but there's essentially 3 or 4 different types of pearl that can be cultured.
I was going to ask, is the DNA, the genetic makeup of these pearls similar, or are they just completely different entities, and the only thing they've got in common is they grow within a mollusk?
They're identical. They're
Wow.
identical. They are purely a little like man-made diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
They are identical. However, one is man-made and one is natural. One comes from nature. And so just going back, there's another little picture I wonder if you could bring. There's a diver just underneath. We just have, that's a general farm, which we just saw. And they have absolutely vast numbers of nets. Here's a guy just going down to actually have a look at the nets they've got. Now, these are all mollusks here. Each one of them, they're bred till they're about 18 months old. And then they're very, very carefully taken in and they are opened. And a very small bead is put in. And the pearl bead actually comes from the States, most of them. And a tiny pearl bead is put into one very, very specific area of the pearl. And then a little bit of mantle from a donor pearl. And this all kicks off an amazing reaction for when it is closed again and put back into the sea. The pearl, the inner bead is obviously an irritant essentially to the mollusk, and then it is coated in nacre and continues to. Now, the nacre is that really beautiful, shiny, sort of iridescent layers that go onto a pearl, and the longer a pearl can stay within its mollusk, its host mollusk, the deeper that is and the more beautiful. They're just the most beautiful, beautiful work of art, really.
But what we are actually saying is the pearl within there is actually just a reaction to an irritant.
It is absolutely that, which is exactly what a natural pearl is as well. And lots of people say it's a grain of sand. It would never be a grain of sand that starts a natural pearl. It is more likely to actually be a small sea creature. Because the mollusk obviously filters water in and out all the time to feed. So a grain of sand it would get rid of. It's more likely like a little creature or something like that would actually start a natural pearl.
A small creature that manages to get into the mollusk, and then obviously it becomes encapsulated by this amazing material. And then is it a layering thing? So it just continually layers and layers and layers until eventually it becomes a pearl.
Literally until usually in the wild, the pearl becomes so large it kills off the oyster.
Wow.
Because it becomes too big for its shell. So going back to the picture, we have, I'm afraid I haven't got a great image of the mollusks, but there are thousands of these, and they are kept at a very specific depth. They are kept, the water is constantly, the temperature is checked constantly. They are checked daily, and it's very important that the right sort of food sources are in the water. So they constantly check the water wherever they are actually being farmed. Probably about 10 years ago, there was a thing called the red tide, and it was a plankton in the water which absolutely destroyed a lot of the Japanese harvest. And for about 2 years, there was a real shortage of pearls, cultured pearls on the market, because this plankton, and it was actually red, it was awful. It was to see the pictures of it. And because the oysters weren't feeding properly, that it actually destroyed the harvest. So they have to keep real sort of tight reins on temperature and what's actually in the water, so they can produce gem quality pearls to get them through to the market.
How successful? I mean, we previously spoke about that it was 1 in 4,000 that would actually contain a pearl, and 1 in 10,000 that would contain a pearl of gem quality. When it comes to these farmed pearls, what's the hit rate like?
Incredibly high, about 1 in 3.
Wow.
But again, it's about quality as well. So you're going to get all range of qualities in there. And I do you know what? I don't know what it is for gem quality. I could look it up for you, but just off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But the next picture is actually just showing Tahitian black pearls being sorted. So we're talking about qualities. And you can see how basic. So some of these pearl farms are honestly in the middle of nowhere, sort of Darwin in Western Australia and Tahiti and the Cook Islands and the Solomon Islands, because again the temperature, that the sea's the right temperature. And you can see here how basic it is, but these are from black-lipped oysters, And these are Tahitian pearls, and you can see them sorting them into different grades and different shades.
So the black pearls we're seeing here, is their genetic makeup the same as the opaque white pearls that we see? Or is there something that inherently different happens, or the area?
From a different animal. They come from a different animal, and it's a black-lipped oyster as opposed to a white-lipped oyster. These are actually oysters. Often smaller pearls are actually grown into a mollusk. They're not really termed an oyster. But I just liked this image. Some of these will be of such superior quality, they will go to the best jewellers in the world. And I'm sure even just from this image, you can see how difficult it would be to make a necklace. So when you see these beautiful graduated single colour Tahitian rose or white rose, if somebody asked you to pick a necklace out of these pieces on the screen, it is a really skilled job, really skilled job. And I think you need a lot
struggle to find
a lot of patience.
Yeah, by all means.
So
it's remarkable, isn't it?
Just if you go on to the next one, and this makes me a bit sad, but this is where we are. This is a picture of a fisherman tending his own pearl beds. So 1920s, pearls really came onto the market, mostly from Japan. And today, as of 2021, China are the biggest producers of culture pearls on the planet. And they have worked out a way, and this will be this gentleman's pearl farm. And you can see the plastic bottles, and each of those has got a rope with oysters underneath. This is probably freshwater. I don't know from the picture, but it's probably freshwater, so they're freshwater pearls.
Annabell, what is the main difference between saltwater and freshwater pearls?
Saltwater being cultured in a sea environment, in a salty sea environment, which gives a real depth to the pearl. It does give a different, it definitely gives a different look to the luster of the pearl. Freshwater were particularly perfected in the 80s, and the Chinese had actually worked with the mollusks, with the pearls themselves, and had quite a lot of husbandry were done to basically try and make these oysters as bulletproof as possible, that they could produce, and also that they could produce multiple pearls. So you could have at least 20 coming out of a pearl instead of just 1 or 2.
Wow.
And so, as you can imagine, the number of pearls coming to the market exploded. And so this, as I don't know for sure, but I think this image is a freshwater farm. This will be this gentleman's farm. Each of these bottles will have a rope hanging down with the mollusks hanging off those. And he will tend this for probably between 1 and 2 years. And obviously harvest everything, and then they'll go into the market. But it was this explosion of freshwater, particularly into the market, that lower prices, because because there were so many of them and they're very, very easy to farm, the prices are low. And it will confuse anybody, it will confuse the market. So if you're going to buy a beautiful row of pearls, you'd want to know why one is £5,000 and one is 700. And there are reasons, absolutely reasons for it. And I wondered if you just bring up this sort of the lovely picture of the multiple pearls on it. And this just shows just a selection of pearls that are available on the market. And I think you'd struggle to know which were which, actually.
So on there, you obviously have a multiple of different sizes and some different shapes, and obviously some different colours. Now, let's take those black ones, for example. Do they come out looking like that, or are they polished, or are they finished, or how is that the appearance that you see?
Well, that was I was going to say. That's what I was going to come on to actually on the next screen. But
okay.
the gem quality pearls come out of the pearl looking like that. They're sometimes waxed. But they come out of the pearl looking like that. They are little pieces of heaven. And you can see right in the middle, there's a button-shaped pearl, and that is exactly, it's called a bouton. And those can be set in jewellery, often in a brooch. You can get to see one just to the left-hand side of it has actually got sort of rather lovely marks like Saturn. And that is a sign of, particularly of a South Sea pearl, one of the really large pearls that can go up to 20 millimeters. By the way, the average pearl that a lady wears is between 7 and 8 millimeters. And these ones can go up to 20. So you can imagine the necklaces that you can make with South Sea pearls. And then you've got your tiny ones, and from looking, so we've got some egg shapes, we've got some button shapes, we've got some tiny little seed pearls, we've got some monsters there as well. And
I was going to say, it's seed pearls is the name, and they're things that are set into brooches or set into other pieces of jewellery, often in multiples, aren't they?
Absolutely, and very much found in Victorian pieces and Edwardian, and they are natural pearls. They are natural pearls, and I've just had a brooch in recently, and it had been worn so much the layers of nacre had been worn away, and you could see it was like tree rings actually. Wow. In the pearl. You could see the age. It had been very well loved. But the next, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to put the next image on of sort of pearl types and how you grade them.
Yeah, so I had a look at this earlier, and actually it's a really interesting image, because clearly when people look at a row of pearls or a string of pearls, which is that the correct terminology to refer to a necklace of pearls, as a string of pearls?
A strand.
Yeah, a strand. Now, many people will look at pearls and think a pearl is a pearl is a pearl, but obviously that's not the case, is it?
Not at all. So we have the size. Size is obviously a really easy factor right at the bottom, and they say it goes up. These essentially sizes would be for Japanese Akoya. And so above 10 millimeter, you would go to your South Sea pearls, which are found in the South Seas, Northern Australia. Your Tahitian pearls, which are the black-lipped oysters. You can get beautiful golden pearls around the Cook Islands. And you will also get freshwater, can also go up to about 15 millimeters. But often the size will help dictate to you what you're looking at. That is one of the key features. Am I looking at a South Sea pearl? Am I looking at an Akoya? And also often natural pearls, you will get up to about 5 millimeters, maybe 6. If you get natural pearls above 7, then they're really unusual. Natural pearls often aren't round as well. They're a slightly sort of they're slightly box shaped again, so that really helps as a valuer when you're actually looking at a strand of pearls and you're thinking, is it a natural row or is it a cultured row? So you've got at the top, this is the most favorite thing, is the luster. And this is basically this lovely play of color that you've got. It is like a mirrored surface. You can see yourself in them, in the gem quality luster. You can see they're like a mirror. And then obviously it goes so left to right, going down in luster. The surface, again, if it's been in a pearl and there's been other bits and pieces, or there's been particularly the seawater that it's been filtering, has had things in it, there'll be marks in the skin of the pearl. It's not always perfect. So obviously, the more perfect the skin, the surface, the higher the value. Next is shape.
Are we looking in a similar method to, for example, we look at a diamond, and obviously the value of a diamond goes down with the more inclusions that it has. Is it a similar kind of scenario with pearls, whereby the size of the pearl is important? However, if there is damage to the pearl, there's also kind of issues with the price on it from that part forward as well?
It's absolutely, there's a few extra things looked at in pearls, but it's much the same as with if you're grading diamonds or coloured stones. The nuances are in the levels of perfection. The next one is shape, which I think is fairly obvious to see, and then we have colour, which obviously we've got a lovely rosy one, and then a sort of a white pearl with a rose overtone is one of the most popular. But interestingly, it depends where in the world you are as well, because if you're lucky enough to have a deep tan, or you have a darker skin tone, you look fabulous in gold pearls, in cream and gold. However, if you get out to, normally into Japan, they make a point of not tanning, and so they want very, very white pearls. So it depends where you're actually shopping in the world, or where you are, is the pearls people actually seek out. And where, if you have a particular type of harvest, you will have a route to market in various parts of the world.
So just going back to the shape section there, which we didn't touch on too much, but obviously when it leans more towards a Baroque shaped pearl, which is a lovely way, I suppose, of saying slightly misshapen. In terms of the value of things, is it extreme when these things go from one side to the other? So, for example, to refer to diamonds again, when you have a flawless diamond, obviously to get something with a very slight inclusion is a huge drop off the cliff in terms of value. And obviously, as you get further along the line, when you have included, it obviously drops the price down quite significantly. Is it the same with pearls? So, for example, let's look at that far left one in the shape, where it's a nice color and a nice shape, and then you go to the far right of it, and it obviously is fairly not misshapen, but just not of the most desirable shape, shall we say? Does that have such a massive effect on the value?
It does have a huge effect on the value, but we go back to looking at a pearl row, or if you want, a designer is making a pair of earrings and it's finding that matching pair or that matching row, and the perfection of the shape is obviously, if you've got very, very high luster, it is very, very clean. Then Pass Bailey, who are an amazing firm in Australia, and really, I think arguably are probably Australia's and sometimes the world's one of the most famous brands. They actually sell necklaces, and they are studded with a pink or a yellow diamond on one of the pearls.
Wow.
And these necklaces have taken them, and they've been pearl farming for about, I think it's 3 generations now, and it takes them 20 years to make one necklace.
Gosh, just in order to find the right things
to get this level of perfection, and it is not unusual at all for it to take a whole generation to make one necklace. I mean, more so if they're natural pearls.
I suppose when we look at diamond necklaces, and let's say we were trying to get 20 brilliant cut stones, you could almost, to a certain degree, make them in that form, if you see what I mean.
You could cut them, absolutely. You could cut them to order.
But with pearls, you literally have to wait until they come along.
And it's also got to be the colour, the luster, the shape, the overtone. When you get to black pearls, they have things like a peacock overtone, which is the most beautiful green. You can get chocolate ones. And so if you're trying to make a necklace of a specific tone, it takes absolutely years. And I think people, because the market has been absolutely flooded with freshwater and also imitation pearls, which are essentially resin-coated beads, which look amazing, but they are pence to make. And both freshwaters and imitation can be dyed. In fact, anything can be dyed, but particularly freshwater can be dyed any colour at all. And they are, again, they're absolutely beautiful. So there's a huge difference between a dyed freshwater and a natural Japanese, or particularly a Tahitian pearl necklace. So that there is always going to be a great big difference. So when you're looking to purchase or you're looking to value, it's always worth asking the questions, because they're not the same thing at all.
Does everyone know, though, the difference? I mean, for example, I think you see in many auction catalogues a string of pearls, but I think for some auction houses or some retailers, potentially it's difficult to tell when they look at a row of pearls, to actually tell, are these salt water, are these freshwater? Are there any easy telltale signs so people will know?
I think always, if you want to buy some pearls, you go to a good jeweler. You can get lots of pearls off the internet, and they are brilliant. They're great price. You can wear them absolutely as much as you want, and they'll look absolutely fantastic. But they'll never particularly go up in value necessarily, because they're a mass-produced product. If you really want to get something interesting, you can get beautiful sort of mixed pink and white rose of larger freshwater, and there's lots of good jewelers around the country who specialize in really lovely pearls. What I think we don't see, and maybe we haven't for a while, is the pearl being front and center stage with celebrity, because I think we take a lot of our sort of fashion sense and fashion interest from what people are wearing at the moment. Well, I've actually put a little slide together, if that's all right, because I think it's changing. We've got a slide here. Pearls, obviously, I think if you wear them, it's a sense of confidence. They go with absolutely everything, but there's an elegance and a strength to pearls. And I think looking at these characters we have here, and I think Kamala Harris at the inauguration wore pearls and made a point of wearing pearls. And they never go out of fashion, they don't. I think what has happened is they've fallen out, people have fallen out of love a bit with them. And I think that goes with a combination of people often inherit granny's old pearls, which haven't been worn for years, have gone all creamy, and they don't look very nice.
Unfortunately, you see these things that are in these boxes, and as you say, they don't come out, they get opened up, and unfortunately, on many occasions, somebody spilt a bottle of Chanel No. 5 in there, and then they've rotted. And it's not a pleasant sight, is it?
It's such a shame, because pearls also need to be worn. And I think that's one of the things that people who do buy pearls don't realise. You're supposed to, obviously, they're strung on silk. So obviously, even the oils from your fingers can actually eat away at the silk. So they really should, if you're wearing them a lot, they need restringing about every 3 years. If they're not worn and just sit in a box all the time, they can discolour, and they go a funny cream colour, which you can't really change. So if you're wearing them regularly, if you just run a very light cloth over them every once in a while, a damp cloth, just to really get sort of makeup and body lotion off them.
Because I can imagine, you can see with the necklaces, they're all worn very close to the skin, so there is going to be makeup, there's going to be fragrance, there's going to be lots of different things, unfortunately.
They do need to be looked after to maintain their value. They absolutely do. And I think there's also a lot of sort of standard pearl rose. It's a bit twin set, isn't it? I think a lot of people have got that idea. But when I went looking for images, and there's nothing twin set about any of these women. There really, really isn't. They're all absolute sort of iconoclasts in their own right. But I think people are confused about pearls. That you can buy them in Marks and Spencer's. You can buy imitation pearls in Marks and Spencer's, and you can buy rose at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 pounds. And I think that you're absolutely right. I don't think people really understand the difference. And if there's a little bit of fear there, people won't go looking. And I think sometimes a good jeweler you can sit down and have a coffee with and look through some of their stock. They will help you understand actually why something is the price and something else isn't. But basically, that if you get a lovely row of a nice even row of Japanese Akoya, which is salt water, you're probably looking between 500 to about 4,000 pounds, and then South Seas probably start at about 8,000 and go upwards. And again, you're buying at that point expertise in pearl farming and these beautiful matched sets.
You are buying, in effect, the craftsmanship that has been passed down over very many years, you know, and the families that have actually worked on that. It's interesting when you say that you don't think they've ever gone out of fashion. I think I was trying to recall somebody that was talking about another item that was quite kind of esoteric, and I think he described it as they haven't become unpopular, they just have a more selective audience. And
Love that.
It's I think that's possibly somewhere that pearls kind of come into that. So, but as you say, with a lot of the people that, you know, you've actually pictured here, all iconic people in their own right, but obviously the pearls have suited them. And, you know, I think some of them, obviously Jackie Kennedy there was very well known for her pearls, for example. But again, it kind of it goes across so many generations. Now, in terms of values, have there been of late, I mean, I know we've got a few examples to come up here, of the way in which pearls have changed in value. So you say they're not a massive investment that's definitely going to go up, but have the values in these changed over the years?
I think it depends on what you're buying. I've actually made just a couple of screenshots. Do you have those? There's a couple of screenshots of pearls that I picked out at some recent auctions. That's not the one, but I'm more than happy to talk about this one. So these are, I think they're coming, they're either imminent or about to come up. So these are beautiful pearl earrings. Natural pearl earrings, obviously they've been specified, but they're made by JAR, the atelier in Paris, who, in my humble opinion, is a god tier designer. They are phenomenal. He doesn't really have a shop where you can go and buy things. He has to want to design for you, and you can be invited. You can go and say, go meet him and go to the atelier, but if he doesn't want to design for you, he won't. So it's a very, very, very niche product, and the people who have these items are incredibly lucky. So there's this pair that are about to go, and they are going for nearly $1 million.
Gosh, and do we think that the vast majority of the value in that is obviously in the pearls? I mean, there's some other nice parts to it, but he's clearly known for the work that he does with his pearls, so that's obviously part of it.
You have 8 natural pearls there, and I mentioned the sort of magic number about 6-7 millimeters, and these are over. They're on that cusp. So you started getting to the magic number of natural pearls, and when we were talking a little earlier about matching the shape, so these are all lovely drop shapes, and if you really look at them, you can see there's a subtle difference. But how many pearls has somebody gone through to find eight matching drop shape? And they've got to have the same luster, they've got to have the same lovely clean skin. So you've got those, and the additional thing is the fact that they've come from the JAR atelier. So there's a little bit of the 2 items there for it to get to potentially $1 million. But there's also another couple I wanted, which are probably a little bit closer to home. See which one comes up first. So these ones here are a lovely pair of cultured pearls.
And quite a simple form.
Very, very simple, on a shepherd's crook fitting. From memory, trying to remember how large they were. I think they were about 8-9 mil. They are not huge. They're larger than usual, but they're certainly not huge. Now, these were, I think if you can tell in the tiny writing, they were going for $500 to $800. Now they went for nearly $2,500. So that's sort of 3-4 times the amount that they thought they were going to go for. And if you look at a lot of larger, really good quality gem quality pearls going through auction at the moment, they are going for this kind of money. They are sort of tripling what previously, even maybe 18 months ago, you'd have been looking at.
So do you think they're on the turn then? But things are going up?
They've got to be right. They've got to be a good match. They've got to be the right size. They've got to have the particular, again, the skin, all the things that we were looking at earlier. If they are really good, and so they are sort of, they're an iconic look, then that people are buying the really nice ones on in the auction market. And I've also, there's another one here, and it's a pair of natural pearl earrings.
Okay, let me
so we'll go back to the same thing again, looking at natural pearls and how many, potentially 20,000 oysters would have been gone through to find this beautiful matching pair. These actually have come with a report with both of them as well, specifying that they are natural pearls. They are quite large. Now these ones are going at actually squints, so $10,000 to $20,000. They thought these were going to go to. Now this is literally just two pearl stud earrings. They went for £92,000. That's when I calculated.
Gosh, I bet you didn't catalogue those.
Pounds. So it goes back to people look for fine pearls, and again, if you just educate yourself even a little bit about something like this, you can, believe it or not, find absolute bargains in auction houses around the country. But also it shows that the really good ones are bringing in a really, really good hammer price. And it goes back to, as always, as a valuer, let's keep an eye on your pearls instead of just thinking, oh, the pearls are not worth anything these days. If you've let them get all grimy and orange, then yeah, they probably aren't really worth much. They're probably worth £100 to £200 at auction. However, if you have kept them well, or you've got a really nice matched row, it probably is worth having them looked at by a valuer, just to see where you're up to.
Well, it goes to show that how broad those prices can be, though, be it natural pearls, and obviously, things that potentially even were thought by the cataloguer at £10,000 to £20,000 actually went up to almost £100,000 when you add in the commission and everything else like that. They're six-figure pairs of pearl earrings, which is frankly remarkable. But obviously, there are some lower echelon pieces as well that are still worth looking at, aren't they?
You get, in every single sale I will use as research for anything I'm doing, there'll always be pearls in the sale. Always, always, always. I would, if you decide to buy pearls, I have to say I would go to the auction house, if we're allowed to, and actually look at them. And check that they do match your skin tone. They are the right size that you want. You can buy online, but I think pearls are they actually speak to you. They're beautiful, and sometimes you can just look and go, yeah, those are the ones.
There's no match for looking at things. You can't accurately look at stuff online. You
can't. And I wondered if I could tell you one of my favourite pearl stories before I go.
Please.
I've actually put, I think it's the last slide I gave you. There's so many brilliant pearl stories, and there's lots and lots of being regaled, be it Cleopatra or the Taylor Burton group. But this is my favourite. And so that we have the lady on the right hand side is Maisie Plant. And the building on the left-hand side is her home on Fifth Avenue in New York. And she did have a rather sort of scandalous breakup of her first marriage and fell madly in love with a Mr. Plant, who was a railroad tycoon, amongst other things. And this was their home for years. And what Maisie wanted, Maisie got. Money there was no limit on the money, and she became quite a society hostess in New York. And this was also the time on Fifth Avenue when there were no shops up here. These were all private houses, and it was even then, we're talking sort of the early 1900s, the private houses, and the right sort of people lived on Fifth Avenue. But gradually shops were starting to move up, and the sort of high society ladies and gentlemen didn't want shops nearby, and so started actually moving out and actually moving to different parts of New York Island, Manhattan Island, and also moving out entirely. So it was at this time that Pierre Cartier had come to New York and was trying to get a foothold. And he couldn't afford a building, not the one he wanted. It had to be Fifth Avenue or roundabout there, and he simply hadn't got the money to do it. But he was gradually having an interested clientele and was becoming very, very well connected. And he had a double row of pearls that you can see that she has on. And he had this double row of pearls, and at the time it was considered the most expensive pearl necklace in the world. It was valued at £1 million.
In the early 20th century?
In the 1910.
Wow.
So it was $1 million, excuse me. It was $1 million. Pierre Cartier, and they never, ever, obviously, they always have their beautiful things from the off. And remember, Cartier had been dealing with European royalty to this point, and British royalty. So they were already dealing at sort of the high level, but even this was felt to be a little rich for the Europeans. So it was brought to America, and it was in a first story. He hadn't even got a shop on the ground floor. He was renting rooms on the first floor of a building, and somehow or other, Maisie sees the necklace. Maisie has to have the necklace. And however, her husband, no matter how rich he was, hadn't got $1 million in cash that was needed to purchase the necklace. So over a period of time, there came to be an agreement between Mr. Cartier and Mr. Plant. Mr. Cartier paid $100 and the double row of natural pearls for this building on Fifth Avenue.
Wow. And
so it is known as the building that was sold for a row of pearls.
Gosh, so that's quite the investment from Mr. Cartier, wasn't it?
It was, and so this is now, it is still Cartier's head office in New York. I think back in, they used it literally as the house for years and years and years. And I think in the 90s and again in about 2016, they redid it. But for years and years, it was as the Plants had left the house. But they still own that now. And I don't know how much that is worth, but Maisie died, sadly, in the 50s. And all her jewellery went to auction, and the £1 million row, it was huge in the papers at the time, this £1 million double row were going to auction, and it went for $153,000.
Wow, so that's quite a drop then. Gosh.
Because at this point, culture pearls were coming in, and the status, because these were the status of having these beautiful extortionate pearl rows, they, basically anybody could wear them now, and they had definitely pearls that had lost their status for a while. Now, if something like that came back to the market today,
I was going to say, what's it worth now?
I don't know. Crazy money. Crazy money.
Is it worth over $1 million now?
I think, and some.
Wow.
And some.
But the question you have to ask is how much is Cartier's head office worth on Fifth Avenue? And I hate to say it, but probably a bit more.
I think he did very, very, very well. So yes, the building that was sold for a row of pearls.
Gosh, that's a lovely story. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Annabell. Fascinating. Now, I think we're unfortunately just about out of time on our webinar today, but I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that was an absolutely fascinating webinar yet again with Annabell. And I'd like to take this point actually to thank all of our experts that are putting themselves up to actually take part in these every week. And it's a pleasure to talk to them, but I know they spend a lot of time on putting these together for your pleasure and for mine. So Annabell, thank you ever so much for joining us again, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future.
My pleasure.
And ladies and gentlemen, always a pleasure to see you, and no doubt we will see you next week for the next fascinating Dallas webinar. So goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you once again, Annabell.